Little roller up along first. Behind the bag. It gets through Buckner. Here comes Knight, and the Mets win it.
A 2-1 pitch. And a drive in the air to deep right field. That ball headed toward the wall. That ball is out of here! Out of here! A game-winning grand slam home run off the bat of Robin Ventura.
Hey. And it's hit deep to left center. Andrew Jones on the run. This one has a chance. Home run! Mike Piazza, and the Mets lead 3-2.
High fly ball to left. Back at the wall, and the captain's going deep to the wall.
Turner drives one to center, chasing Nimmo back to the warning track right at the fence. He made the catch! Oh, wow! The catch of the year from Brandon Nimmo! He took a home run away from Justin Turner! Wow.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go!
Welcome to the Say Hello podcast. Episode 35. Welcome. My name is Casey Lynn. I'm joined by my co-host, Bill Pulsifer, and we do have Stephen White, of course, behind the scenes as our producer. As always, this podcast is brought to you by Roots-Recordings.com. Bill, it's been a while. We've had, life come in the way of certain things, and it's a pleasure to have back both of us together here on the Say Hello podcast, episode 35. How are you doing?
I'm all right. I'm hanging in there, man. Good to finally be back. It's been a long time.
Yeah, good to have you back. As
you.
we always do, of course, with episode 35, we have to have our numbers thrown out there for pitcher. Any player in Mets history is worn number 35. I looked at the list, Bill. I know you probably didn't because you're a busy guy. There's not many out there. For 35. I did episode 34 when I flew solo. That was a good 34 was a good number in Mets history. Anything come to your mind or no? I'll just go through the list real quick.
Well, I'll go with three former teammates. Two teammates as Mets and one a teammate with the Brewers, even though he wore it with the Mets.
Okay.
First off, Dougie Henry, relief pitcher.
Yes. I remember him well.
Yeah, big
95 and 96.
Yeah, big righty, big nice handlebar mustache. Rick Reed, obviously, had some successful years. Called him the poor man's Maddox there for a little while, and he was a very good pitcher. And then Stormy Weathers, David Weathers, who I played with in Milwaukee. Those are my 35s that I remember.
Yeah. I remember Doug Henry very well because of that mustache. And 95, 96 is when I was starting to get into the Met fandom era. And Rick Reed, I mean, I put him in my top 5 most underrated Mets of all time. So the poor man's Greg Maddux is actually a compliment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I know you meant it. So, other than the ones that you mentioned, and that was a good 3 right there. John Gibbons wore it in 1986, not for a long time. As he became the Mets bullpen catcher, but he did wear number 35 back in 86. He's currently the Mets bench coach right now. You mentioned Rick Reed, Doug Henry, Weathers. Dylan G wore it for a long time with the Mets. A serviceable starting pitcher. We all remember Dylan G. He wore it from 2011 to 2015. And then I would think the most famous 35 that the Mets have ever had, but he was only here for, I feel like, a fart. Justin Verlander last year.
Right.
He wore number 35, but basically was a Met for 3 months? So,
not long. Not very long.
But those are your third. Yeah. And he's pitching pretty well now for the Astros after he missed a month with another injury to start the year like he did with the Mets. So, episode 35. There is so much that we have to catch up on. I don't even know where to start. we're not going to sugarcoat it. I mean, we're 35 episodes deep. We started way back when, at the end of last season, when they were selling and they were out of it all throughout the offseason. And here we are, the end of May, beginning of June. And to talk about this team, which had low expectations, then they signed JD Martinez. And it was like, whoa, what are they doing here? Are we punting? Are we not? But to talk about this team constructively right now at this moment, Bill, 11 games under 500. The season before June is basically over. I mean, I'm not going to say it's over, but we'll go into a little deeper dive of what's going on here with the Mets. But in your wildest imaginations, and I know the number that you put on with the Mets with wins, and we don't have to, say it out loud. And I was the optimist who thought it was a little bit more, and they could creep into the postseason, being how 6 teams make it. But my question to you: did you ever think that the Mets would be this bad, this early, and be essentially out of it before June?
I'll say this. Obviously, didn't expect to have Senga going down early on. That changes quite a bit. Like I said, all offseason was definitely hoping to see some adjustments at the plate from certain players that have not happened. And those numbers are exactly where they were at this point of the year last year, unsurprisingly, because they say baseball is a game of adjustments, and nothing could be more the truth. Obviously there's guys that are probably pressing quite a bit, because they have high expectations for themselves. Look, man, the bottom line is I didn't expect them to be necessarily contending this year. You obviously hope for the best, and you hope that the team that you root for does well. But probably a little lower than I would have expected at this moment. But I did not expect them to be pushing for big time playoff spots.
My hope was that they hovered around 500 and would have to make David Stearns and Steve Cohen at the deadline around there, July 31st, really have to make a big decision on whether we're buyers or sellers. And the Mets on the field have shown, right as of right now, that if this continues, they find ways to lose basically the same way, by having leads, and then the bullpen implodes, and we'll get into the Diaz injury. Or they just don't show up, as you mentioned, where their offense, their batters, their core batters, they don't show up, and they're just shut out every game. It's like Groundhog Day every day, but it's not, because it's a different ending, but it just drives you insane because it's like, what way are they going to find a way this way? So, I feel for Met fans. We are both Met fans, but, sometimes we got to speak the truth. And right now, this team effing sucks. And we knew it would be a transition year, Bill, but we didn't think, and at least I didn't think, that I would be throwing the towel in before June. It's a numbing feeling, because tell me if you agree with this. Baseball is a distraction to some people. It's an escape from reality. It's a sport. Guys are paid millions upon millions, gazillions, to play a sport, a kid's game. And for us fans, and you played the game for half your life, basically, and you still are a big part of it with, your son in pro ball and you doing lessons and everything. But for me, it's like, well, I got to find some new hobbies, at least for 2024.
Yeah, that's definitely tough.
It's I don't want to use the word depressing, but it's like, come on.
Yeah, you don't want your peak interest of the baseball season to be done before the summer kicks in, and it's obviously a bummer. Obviously, still going to be checking in and tuning in as Mets fans do, and paying attention, because you root for your club, win, lose, or draw, and unfortunately, they're losing right now. I do have a little bit of a problem with the kids game thing, because if you know the history of the game, it's actually a men's game. It was created by men for men, and then kids started to play it later. But they definitely make a lot of money. Listen, they don't want to be out there losing. They don't want to be doing that. Guys aren't holding up their end of the bargain when it comes down to it. I think the bullpen at the beginning of the year, there was fool's gold in a way.
It was a strength.
Well, simply for the fact that it's not a strength now is your starting pitchers couldn't get through 5 innings or couldn't go past 5 innings for the first 6 weeks of the season. So it was only a matter of time before that kind of took a turn. And just watching the game earlier before we got on here, Ottavino does not look like the same guy. Obviously, Garrett has came down to earth a little bit, but to be expected, when you're throwing, your starter goes 4 2/3, and now Garrett's going 3 1/3 every second or third day. Bullpens just aren't made to work that way. And then the offense, they haven't held up their side of the bargain at all.
Yeah, and we could talk about it. The season is 1/3 of the way through, so you could project the numbers now times everything that what is it by 4 for 162 games. The core lineup, and this is where we'll dive a little deep in. You mentioned the bullpen. Before we go into the offensive struggles, Brooks Raley, Tommy John surgery, out for the year. That was a big blow.
Huge.
And there's nothing we can do about it. That puts more emphasis now on Jake Diekman, right? Who's not Brooks Raley. He's pitched okay, but what we really need to talk about is Edwin Diaz before we talk about the offense. Now, he was put on the IL on Wednesday for a right shoulder impingement. And I know what it means, but if you want to go maybe into further detail of what that means to the fans listening to the Shalo podcast, it's a 15-day IL, but that could, and you can't, and don't, I've seen it on Twitter, X, people are like Phantom IL because he sucks. No, if you're not 100% healthy and coming back from a major knee surgery, maybe your mechanics are out of whack. And that's where I want you to take the floor. Diaz has sucked. He's blown 3 saves in a row, 4 out of 5, an ERA since, I think, May 10th or whatever it is of above 16, giving up home runs. He's a shell of himself. I love the guy, but he's cost the Mets 5 wins just by himself. So if he needs time on the IL for whatever reason, if it is the right shoulder impingement, tell us what that's about. And maybe do you think it has a lot to do with him having a good April, but a horrible May?
Yeah, the impingement itself is your bicep tendon or your labrum being pinched in the joint, and it gets constantly pinched and it gets inflamed and it gets irritated, and it's not abnormal. It is something that does happen. I don't think that this is phantom DL at all. I think that Edwin Diaz has probably done everything he possibly can to try to get out there. He doesn't want to miss any more time, and I don't think he's necessarily looking for a handout, or a make me feel better thing. I think he wants to go out there and perform. I think the warning signs were there a little bit early in the year. 2 things: a little bit of a drop in velocity and a little bit of a lack of fastball command, which a lot of times could lead to make you believe that there was something going on. And obviously we've known that Diaz is a mental guy as well as a physical guy. And when things go bad for him, sometimes they tend to spiral even further. And we saw that last week, where in the clubhouse, he got a little emotional. This guy wants to win. This guy wants to do his very best. He enjoys being a Met, and I wish they didn't turn the strobe lights and do all that shit after the guy didn't play for a year. I think maybe you're heaping pressure on a guy that didn't play for a year, and everybody's going to say, "Oh, well, they're making millions of dollars. They shouldn't." Well, you got to deal with the pressure. Sure, yeah, that would be great if people were robots, and they're not. So if he's out there and he's battling, and he is dealing with some injuries, but he wants to battle, maybe sometimes we can use that as, hey, you know what? Let's get your arm feeling all the way better. And also, we can also give you a little bit of a breather. I think they did him wrong the other day by saying that we're going to get him a few opportunities to not pitch in high leverage situations. He went out and had a 1-2-3 inning in an 8th, and the very next day he was the closer. So that lets you know that the pressure is they're feeling the pressure of, we got to start winning. Unfortunately, I don't know if that's going to be the case this year. And I think long term, maybe they've gotten to the point where they're like, you know what, long term, we need Edwin Diaz to be Edwin Diaz. So if we need to take a little bit of a step back, he's been battling through some shoulder injuries, which has hindered his performance, which has then hindered his confidence. Hey, man, if it's not this year, Mets fans are going to want Edwin Diaz to be Edwin Diaz next year. If it's not, or later in the season, so he can get that groove going back again and be the guy that we know that he can be.
Yeah, a couple of good points that I think you made that I agree with. Definitely not a phantom IL. We saw what happened with Billy Epler, and he was suspended for the whole year. doesn't take that
They'd be
quite
all over
well.
that.
Right. It makes sense that he's been struggling lately. The velocity has been back, but his slider has been a shell of what it was. But the point I really agree with you is that they're looking probably at the fact that what you said, long term, Edwin Diaz, something's not right. If it's your arm, which is why he's on the IL, we got to get it straightened out because that knee injury that was ripped up to shreds, could lead to a really bad arm injury if you're all out of whack.
Absolutely.
So I give them credit if that's the real reason, which I'm going to give them the better benefit of the doubt. And yeah, this was always a transition year, and maybe being at the time 10 games under 500 and him blowing 5 of those games, it's like we need him for 2025. Let's get it right now.
I agree.
And unfortunately, Adam Ottavino he started off really well for the Mets, but didn't they all? Like you said, Reed Garrett, Jorge Lopez, but it was fool's gold, like you said, because they have thrown too many games. Brooks Raley, we can't say that he threw too many games early on. I can't, but it caught up with them because of the starters, like you said, not going deep into games.
I don't understand what they do in spring training nowadays where guys aren't coming out of spring training ready to throw 100 pitches as starters. I don't understand it. I really don't. I know, and I probably threw too many when I was in spring training as a young professional, throwing 30 to 34 innings in a spring training. We can't start a season and having guys going 85 pitches for 3 or 4 consecutive starts because bullpens are not meant to throw every single day. You need to be able to come out. And look, McGill did it yesterday. His second start back, he went deep into a ball game. These guys should be coming out of spring training, I feel like, going deeper into ball games.
And he pitched great.
Let's
keep it positive for 1 second. 2 guys that came back off the IL. McGill started 1 game earlier this year, but earlier this week, Monday or Tuesday, 7 innings, 9 strikeouts. His best game of his career. He looked great. He's got this new pitch. And we'll talk about Senga a little bit later, called the American Spork. It's it's a splitter, but they get creative and with their names. But David Peterson, and they lost the game, but his first start after hip surgery of 2024, 5 innings, 3 runs. Like, he struck out 3, but he didn't walk the ballpark. So it was a good start.
Right, and he had 14 more pitches in him.
Right.
He threw 6 starts in the minor leagues. This is not his first start of the year. He had 6 starts. If you're not up to 100 pitches by 6 starts, the program doesn't seem to be right.
You're absolutely right.
He had 14 more pitches in him today.
They did take him out after 5 innings, and he threw 86 pitches. So you're absolutely right. You would have to talk to David Stearns, Carlos Mendoza, because I agree with you.
It's a different mentality, and I'm not sure it's the right mentality. We've talked about in the past episodes about the arm injuries and that, and they're so worried about them. They're happening anyway. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Let the man throw another 14 pitches, and maybe he gets through an inning. Maybe, and then there's one less 3-out opportunity that your bullpen has to get. I don't know. The game's changed quite a bit. I'm not necessarily sure for the better. The numbers crunchers guys that didn't play will tell you that this is a better way of doing it, but I think that after 6 starts, you should be up to 100 pitches. 45, 60, 75, 90, 100.
Yeah. Maybe the only thing I could think of is they wanted to leave him on a high note that he got through the 5th unscathed. He can sleep at night. He knows he's going to be in the rotation, so let's get a good start under his belt to start with.
I'm glad he felt good about it because nobody else probably felt good about it after the game.
Right, because look what happens. He leaves the game, and the aforementioned bullpen does what they have done. So, it's a trickle-down effect. You throw a pebble into a river, and you wait for the effects. Starters don't go long. Look what's happened to this bullpen. Now, Edwin Diaz, he pitched a shit ton of games as a closer. He was pitching half the amount of games before he went on the IL. We knew Reed Garrett was going to come down to earth and not have his 0.46 ERA. And unfortunately, when you have a good offense, and this is where we're going to segue, to the offense, it will mask some of these problems. A la like years past, the Yankees, for instance, when they had such a great offense but not the best pitching staff. This year, it's a completely different story. They have the best pitching staff, and their offense is good. This year for the Mets, we can't go through every player, and we've done this before, but there's so much talk, Bill, about blowing up the core and just getting rid of everybody not named Alvarez because he's 22 years old and a catcher. And, basically that's it. Like we're even talking Vientos, Beatty, young guys. Like I get it. I'm a part of it. I'm part of the fandom. I don't, and Pete Alonso is a part of that as well. He's on a walk year for a contract. There's so much talk about. We're so sick and tired of just every year this happening, and 2022 was a fluke, and this is Steve Cohen's fourth fucking year, and look what's happened. No one's at the games, highest payroll, eating money to just trade players. Listen, I don't agree with blowing it all up, but I could get specific here. Jeff, and I want your opinion and whatever you think, of course. Jeff McNeil, love the guy. Passion-wise, he could throw his tantrums and his helmet and all that. I like passion and emotions. I do, right? Because he cares. And I don't care how you show it. If you show it, great. Just don't hurt anybody. But holy mother of whatever, Jeff McNeil looks washed. I'm going to call it like I see it. He's batting eighth. He's batting .230. He hasn't hit a lick since his batting title in 2022. Call it banning the shift, whatever. If you're an avid golfer, Jeff, you can just usually, do what you were doing in 2022 when you won a batting title. I don't know what happened to Jeff McNeil, but we said he was so important as an X factor coming into this year. He has been worse than I think everybody thought and more. Agree? Disagree? Maybe a little bit of both?
Oh, yeah. I think I definitely have to agree. I will say the .230 is probably one of the higher batting averages. I can name a few other guys that might be
and that's
making
a joke.
$2 more that might be hitting, 30 points less than that. And that was something that we talked about during the offseason. We'd like to see is these people that tell you the batting average doesn't matter don't know what they're talking about. And I know that they're running organizations, but it doesn't seem to be working necessarily. And I do see that there's guys out there that are capable of doing it. Speaking of which, guy with the Giants, they were playing last week. He's hitting, I can't remember his name right now off the top of my head, but he's hitting 330 something. He's got 7 or 8 home runs. He's got 20 plus RBIs. Right-handed hitter. I'm drawing a blank.
Lamad Wade?
No.
Lamad Wade?
Nope. Anyway, neither here nor there. It is capable. It can happen. So people telling you the batting average doesn't matter, I'm not buying that. I'm never going to buy it. I've said before about McNeil, and with money probably comes a little bit more golf as well. I don't know if that's the case or not. I just know that I've said in the past, if I was a baseball hitter, golf needs to be put on the shelf a little bit because it is 2 different swings. I don't care what anybody says. I know maybe it's a little bit closer nowadays because of the quote-unquote launch angle swing, but I don't know if you necessarily want Jeff McNeil with a launch angle swing anyway. We want him spraying the ball all over the place.
Yeah.
When it comes to the core, I think misery loves company, and I think that maybe there's been a little bit too much misery for some of the company, so maybe there does need to be some changes made. What they're going to be to be determined, obviously, but I think that with new leadership in the organization, with the way that things have kind of went over the last 2 years now, or a year plus now, I would suspect that some changes are gonna happen.
Yeah, and the core, by the way, Alvarez. I'm sorry, not Alvarez. I mean, we're talking about the veteran core. Lindor, Alonso, McNeil, and Nimmo. We could be honest here. Nimmo and Lindor are not going anywhere. They're in the middle and early on huge long contracts. 7 more years for Lindor and 8. What did Nimmo sign for? 8 years. So he's in year 2 of an 8-year contract. And Nimmo is not having a good year either, but he's not batting average wise down, but he's still productive for the Mets. I look at him as a productive player. The problem is Marte, but he's soon going to be gone too. And we talked about this. He was an X factor that we were going to hope would do well. Now, is he doing horribly? No, but his OPS is under 700 like everybody else. The only players above 700, which is like average for a hitter, Alonso and Vientos, but the sample size is nothing for Vientos.
Right.
So I talked about it last episode with Beatty and Vientos and how that's all going to work out with them being on the same team at the
Confusing
same
as well.
time. It boggles my mind, but because Vientos had like 2 extra base hits one game, and they did what they did last season. He didn't play the next 2 games, So, but going back to the core, I think David Stearns, and this is why Steve Cohen brought him in. It's up to him. He's got the keys to the kingdom, to the palace. He's gonna revamp this team and burn it to the ground if he wants. Keep the players that he thinks obviously are going to produce later down the road, and he's got some tough decisions. I don't think David Stearns was lying to us when he thought this team could make the playoffs, because who could see that all this stuff would happen? Senga, Diaz, other
Alvarez.
injuries, Alvarez being hurt, right? But, again, Diaz, if he doesn't blow 5 saves and gives up 5 runs in a 10th inning that didn't count as a blow save, this team could be 500. But it should happen.
I'm not gonna put it all on Diaz, man. There's plenty of guys in that lineup that are hitting at the top.
I'm trying to name them. I know.
That should not be hitting
Marte,
at the top of the lineup anymore. At what point in time do you put somebody down in the lineup?
Thank you.
Earn your spot.
Yes. Bill, what do you think about this? Because it's been a while since we've had our podcast. Lindor and Nimmo got switched from batting 1 to 3. They flip-flopped. Lindor is now right. It should be Lindor batting 8th. And honestly, okay, he should be batting 10th. I don't give a shit now if he's making $34 million. Give him a couple days off. I know he's a gamer and he wants to play and he plays through injuries, and I respect the shit out of him for it. I do. But if you are not helping the team and you are not clutch and the numbers are right there, sit for a couple games. I agree with you. They should be lower. Nimmo's a leadoff hitter to me.
There was a time where you moved a guy down in the lineup, and not necessarily as a quote unquote punishment, but possibly to get him some better pitches to hit.
Right.
Maybe down in the lineup he doesn't get attacked the same way that he gets attacked when he's up at the front of the lineup with possibly runners on base or big situations. That's not a thing anymore. And I think that I use does not compute, because it all comes down to, like you're talking about Vientos. You get 2 extra base hits and you don't play for the next 2 games. That's somebody typing on a keyboard and trying to look at numbers that do not use the eye test. And for me, expectation wise, for let's say Lindor, he's got to get out of it. Well, the eye test is telling you he's not close to being out of it. So why do you keep putting the pressure to have to hit first, second, or third? Put him down 7, 8, or 9 for a few games. And I agree with you. Sit down for a game, bro. Sit down completely. Sit down, maybe even 2 games. Sit down completely. At this point in time, if they're chasing the playoffs, that's fool's gold as well.
Right.
And like you said, Lindor is going to be here for another 7 years. So you don't want to completely lose him if he's going to be your shortstop for the foreseeable future. You got to do what's a little bit better for him, maybe. Get him down in the lineup a little bit. Let's stop swinging at high fastballs in and breaking balls down. Like, the other day, what happened with him doing the statue or the trophy the other day, that should be unacceptable.
Yep.
Should be unacceptable. I feel like in another time, star or not, the manager would have said, "Hey, Francisco, go ahead and take a seat. Right, we're gonna play the rest of this one out." Nothing happens. We hit him first the next day again. So I don't know. Very frustrating. I'm sure he's frustrated, beyond frustrated.
Of course he is. He's a gamer and he wants to win. I respect that. But he's not helping.
So let him hit 8th or 9th for a few days. He's still going to get his at-bats. Maybe it will not be that extra at-bat, but maybe that 1 for 4 turns into a 1 for 3 because you didn't get that extra at-bat, or that 1 for 5 turns into a 1 for 4, and you can look the next day, because a lot of guys look, whether you believe it or not, my batting average actually went up that day.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I can look and that makes you feel a little bit more positive about the whole thing. I could be wrong, but I think that maybe he doesn't need that extra at-bat right now each night. Maybe he doesn't need it.
Yeah. And on the flip side, with all the Lindor talk, it's affected Nimmo. Nimmo now batting third, his strikeout rate has gone up 39% since he's batted third. Just because he's, I don't know what the reason is for, but he was always forever, his whole career, the prototypical leadoff hitter, taking pitches, getting walks, sprinting to first. And I was like, all right, I'm okay with the flipping of 1 through 3, but it's not worked out. So not to beat a dead horse here, but Lindor should be batting lower in the lineup. And Nimmo, in my humble opinion, should just bat first, leave him
I
alone.
agree. But there was a time period there a few weeks ago where he was being productive RBI wise and all that. And you know what? When you get that from your prototypical leadoff guy, take it for what it is. Don't try to turn him into being something that he's not, because obviously now we're seeing, like you said, a 39% increase in strikeouts because his mentality might change a little bit differently than what it usually is. Hit the ball the other way. Be a 3-2 count every single at bat. I watch the games. He swings for more home runs than you've ever seen in the past. What did he hit? 19 or 20 last year. That's a lot for a leadoff hitter.
No, I believe he hit. I would have to look it up. I think he was in the lower 20s, mid 20s.
His career high for home runs. Let's not ask him to go. Man, there's other ways of scoring other than home runs, and batting average would have something to do with that.
Yeah, I'm always, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But he obviously wanted to add more power to his game without sacrificing him getting on base, and it worked last year. But now he's hitting barely above 200, and they all are. Nobody on this team other than JD Martinez hitting around 260, 270, and small sample size, obviously bigger than Mark Vientos, who has his batting 330, but in X amount of games. No, we're not. Yes, we're singling out Marte and McNeil and Lindor, but they deserve it. They're not hitting their weight. They're not, and it's
and
we
Pete's
talked about
Pete's been a little too hot and cold.
Unfortunately. Pete is average 240. Has his OPS right around where his average is as for a career. But this is what happens when all the components of when we have Pete on our podcast as a guest. What was his analogy about a car and in the engine? If one part isn't working, it's going to affect every other part in the engine. And he was right.
Well, you can look to the Alvarez injury, kind of like the starting of a piston or a tie rod or push rod or something going south. And
I'm glad you mentioned that. Let's take a little reprieve of the knocking of the meet the mess right now, as I call it. Francisco Alvarez. Prior to him getting hurt, when he rounded first base and tore his ligament in his thumb, the Mets were 11-8. Since his injury of him being in the IL, I'm looking where I wrote it down. 11-24. Now, those are the numbers. Fight me, guys. I'm not saying he was hitting everything out of the ballpark, and his average wasn't anything to talk about. But his energy, his calling the games, the numbers don't lie. His ERA was 2 points better for a pitching staff from him behind the plate. No, he wasn't throwing out runners like Tomas Nido, but he brings this young energy that just seemed to brighten everything up. And look what I just said, everyone listening and watching here. 11-8 when they started the year off 0-5, right? He gets hurt, they're playing 300 ball. When he was playing, they were playing 579 ball. So I'm glad you brought up Francisco Alvarez. I think him getting hurt more so than anybody was, up until where we are right now, the end of May, beginning of June, the biggest problem that the Mets had to endure. Regardless if he was only batting 220, the energy, the swag, the confidence, they miss that. I think when you play every day and you travel, you feed off of that. And I think the Mets poorly and desperately miss that from Francisco Alvarez.
I can agree to that. I'm sure these guys are all pros, so they probably that's not the case. That's not the case. But you know what? Hey man, the proof's kind of in the pudding a little bit. Things definitely took a turn. I think it says a lot for the fact that you call up your AAA catcher, who for years had been a big league catcher, and the guy that was the backup catcher rarely sees the field. That's telling a little bit. That means you really didn't have any confidence in the guy that was the backup. And why wouldn't Nido then be the backup anyway? I guess unless you were thinking this situation in case Alvarez
Bill,
does get hurt, you have somebody that has been playing on an everyday basis. Sucks to be Thomas Nito if Alvarez is healthy, I guess. But I find that a little bit strange that Nito is playing more regularly than how do you say his last name? Navarez.
Narvaez, but
Navarez.
to
Yeah,
answer your question, Tomas Nino's a better player. Yes, Narvaez had the game-winning hit, over the last weekend. It was his first ever hit at Citi Field. Hit. I mean,
wow.
I'm going to say this, and it has nothing to do with Bill Pulsifer. It's all Casey right here. Billy Epler was the one who signed Omar Narvaez to a 2-year, $15 million contract. I'm sure when Omar's agent, got that call, he thought it was a prank. Like, who are you bidding against, offering $7.5 million a year? Because he has just been awful. So when Alvarez comes back and he's been sent on a rehab assignment and he's beating the 8-week timeline, going to Double-A Binghamton, right? He'll beat the 8 weeks, but unfortunately the Mets are going to be way out of it when he returns. But we all knew Alvarez was going to come back earlier than that timeline because he's hungry and he's young. But learn, what do they all say on X now? Get ready to learn whatever language, buddy, because Narvaez is going to be DFA'd. Because Nito is a major league catcher and Narvaez is just not. And the numbers speak for themselves. So I just wish we can't go back in time. Injuries happen. They do. Look at Acuna for the Braves, right? I mean, they won the freaking World Series in 2021 when he was out for the year. But I would love to go back in time and see if Alvarez not get hurt and where would they be on like June 1st,
Yeah.
But that's not how it works. Last thing before we get to the mailbag. Go ahead.
I was going to just put a little bow on the Acuna. Note to self, don't try to steal third with on a throwback to the pitcher.
That will tear your knee up.
The baseball gods are watching.
Yeah. And
steal third
I never wish
pitch
it
being thrown to the – that's a little too much, maybe, on the ball back to the pitcher.
And it's his other –
unfortunately
for Acuna.
Because obviously baseball is better when Acuna is playing. It's a better sport when he's healthy.
Listen, I don't want to see anybody get hurt ever, And Braves fans, they shit on Met players when they get hurt. That's them, and they have to wait for their karma to hit them. Whether it's the second injury for Acuna, but I hope that he can return because now it's 2 ACL tears for 2 different knees. It is. Let's talk about one more thing before we get to the mailbag. I got to get your opinion about Kodai Senga. Okay, I've been waiting because I wanted to talk to you about it. Senga, this whole year, it's been just a mind-boggling mess. First, it was mechanics, and then it was triceps, and then it was, cortisone shot, then setback this, and all the quotes. And I'm just thinking, what in the world is going on? Like, he wants to pitch because he still has an outside chance of getting that opt-out clause that hits. He 400 innings by 2025, the end of it, and he pitched 166 his first year in 2023. So it's not out of the question, but it's slowly going away. So he wants to pitch because then he can get a new contract. But have you ever heard of a player say, I'm healthy, which he clearly is not, because they found inflammation in his triceps and he's lightly throwing, and we're in June basically. Have you ever heard of a pitcher saying, I'm healthy, but my mechanics aren't where I want, so I'm not going to go to rehab starts even though I've thrown 5 bullpens?
No, yeah, that was a little surprising to hear that. Obviously, you're going to have to eventually try to iron your mechanics out in game speed. And that's what the rehab assignments are for. Makes you wonder how much of it was maybe he wasn't necessarily feeling healthy and was trying to say optimistically that he's feeling better and make it a mechanical thing. I don't know. I can't get inside his brain. I did find it a little strange that you say I'm healthy, but my mechanics are off. Well, then you go on your rehab assignment. And it doesn't matter what your numbers are there. You're a major league pitcher. After 30 days, you're going to, even if it's the full 30 days, you're going to pitch in the major leagues at that point in time. You can have 4 to 5 starts to iron the mechanics out if that's the case. I would think, obviously, the cortisone shot, little worrying, because in my day, usually cortisone shots in the arm were usually like a masking of something that's going on. Hopefully it's just for inflammation, because cortisone is good at banging inflammation out. But I remember Brett Saberhagen having tears in his arm and getting cortisone shots every start because, you're just trying to hold it together towards the end of your career. Obviously, Senga's not towards the end of his career, but I don't know. I mean, iron your mechanics out in game time, game speed, because even if you feel like you've got everything ironed out in the bullpen, let's see what it's like when you get into game speed. That might change everything. And I'll use Edwin Diaz as an example. Like we talked about, he missed all year last year, threw plenty of bullpens towards the end of the season and then all winter, and then got into game speed and not just spring training speed, but big league speed, and, ends up coming up with a sore arm.
Yeah, and both Edwin Diaz and Senga said they were both healthy. Like
we like to lie,
right? And I understand it because you don't want to compromise yourself and everything that comes with it. But they were not healthy. Narrator. Indeed they were not healthy because look what's happened.
Right.
So the optimists say that Senga still could be back after the All-Star break. No, I mean he's going to need. Whenever he gets into a rehab start, it's going to be another month. So we just could do the math by the calendar. I don't expect, and I'm not being a pessimist here, I'm being a realist, and I hope I'm wrong. I don't expect to see Senga at all in 2024. I hope I'm wrong, but there's nothing to tell me that we will. There's just nothing. Mechanics this, triceps this. It started with his shoulder. We didn't even talk about that. That was the problem.
Right.
Shoulder. So I don't have any information to go on that he will pitch this year. And if he does, it won't, it could be in September. So I hope I'm wrong.
I would think at the very, very earliest, end of July at this point in time. You hope.
Yeah.
Because obviously you don't want to have a pitcher that you're going to rely on come next year to go the full season without pitching. Once again, we'll look to Diaz again. I know you've been playing baseball your whole life and all that, but there's something to be said about being out there and being in the battles and being in the wars and going out there and trying to do it. It's not easy.
And to put a bow on the Senga before we get to the mailbag, if it really looks like 2024 now is a punt season for what we thought expectations were low coming in and the way that they played, which is so poor. Let's get these guys right. Diaz, Senga for 2025 and whatever that takes, whether it's pitching in 2024 or not, whatever it is for the confidence, for the mechanics, whatever, because no, they're just not going to do anything this year at this point. I mean, we talked about it earlier.
There's a lot of teams ahead, and things aren't trending in the right direction, unfortunately. So get them right, get the guys right, because the coach is going to look to spend money in the free agent market come the off season.
Oh, he definitely will. We'll have a lot to talk about with the Juan Sotos and the Max Frieds and the Corbin Burns, all of them available. Pete Alonso is a free agent. So before we get to the mailbag, want to remind everybody listening, follow us wherever you get your podcasts. We're on everywhere, every platform, whether that's Spotify, Apple, Google Cast, Firefox, you call it, Google, whatever. And if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe at Shay Hello Media. Like us, share us, leave a comment. We'll answer it. We really appreciate it. Whether you're watching or listening, Bill and I, for our first podcast together in a little while. So I'm happy to have my co-host back. And we haven't done this in a while. So we're going to go into the mailbag. We always say, write us at Shay_hello. Shay_hello puts out questions that you may have for the podcast. We ask you to write questions for Bill and I for baseball and Mets. And we're going to go back to last week's mailbag that we didn't answer. And we're going to answer now because the questions still pertain to this day. So, you ready, Bill?
I'm ready.
All right. Let's start with Jeff Cohen. He has a good question. It's for the both of us. He writes, and by the way, Jeff Cohen, avid listener, Baseball and Barbecue podcast. I've subscribed. He's a great follow, great podcast. Check it out, Baseball and BBQ. He writes in, question for both of you. There are a plethora, love that word, of baseball books over the years. Do you have a favorite one that you enjoyed reading? And have you ever read, quote, The Glory of Their Times, the story of the early days of baseball told by the men who played it, and it was by L. Ritter. He said it was fantastic. You want to take this one first?
It is fantastic. And I recently just had a friend of mine, a Mets fantasy camper, John Finn, sent it to me about 2 months ago. And I highly recommended read. And Jeff Cohen is got good taste in baseball books. That's a good one.
So I haven't
and I love
read
baseball
this one.
history, and it's told by the guys that did it. You know, their stories. It's a good one.
I'm going to have to check it out because now I got you and Jeff vouching for it. I will check it out for sure. As for me, I'm sure you've read this, Ball 4, that famous book. Why am I blanking on the name who wrote it? Jim Bowden?
Yeah.
Yeah. Great, early 70s book, a little deep dive into the MLB living kind of thing. And I've read, the memoir on David Wright, How the Bad Guys Won back in 86, that huge book on the Doc and the Darryl stories and the 86 Mets, how the bad guys won and all that. Those were all great books. So thanks for the question, Jeff. And I'll definitely have to read that book for sure. Next question. This is a new one. V Twins 2008. He goes, do y'all think the Mets will be sellers at the deadline? Well,
go ahead.
I'll take this one. As of right now, early June, they're 11 games or so under 500. They've lost their closer. They've had other injuries that they have endured, with probably more coming. The Mets are sellers at the deadline, as it pains me to say. Plus, this was the plan all along. I'm not going to be naive. There's a reason David Stern signed all these guys to one-year contracts. Luis Severino, Sean Manaea.
Severino's been great. Manaea's been pretty damn good.
And you have to remember, the Mets, and I hate this rule, by rule, every team gets one all-star. And I hate that rule because it takes away from somebody who really deserves it if they're on a loaded team. Right now, if the Mets had an all-star, it would be Manaea or Severino.
I agree.
It just would. They're sellers. We don't have to go deep into it. JD Martinez is up there. Harrison Bader on a one-year contract. We named the two pitchers. And then you have the bullpen guys, Jorge Lopez, Adam Ottavino. All these guys, you're looking at a 2025 team that completely, 90% of it could be different. 90%, even more. It's unheard
That's
of.
A lot.
We'll see what happens. You can't trade everybody at the deadline. You got to keep a roster, But when you have Jet Williams in AAA hurt, Drew Gilbert, who they got for Verlander, hurt, Acuna's heating up that they got for Scherzer, so look for him to come up. But you can't trade everybody, But yes, thank you for the question. I don't think you have anything more to say. They're sellers, Bill, if it keeps up.
I'd have to concur.
Okay. Jake 12889, he has a question for both of you fellows. That's what he writes. The Mets in away games are hitting 267. That is second on the road, and second best in the majors. At Citi Field, they're only hitting 207, which is the worst at home in Major League Baseball. What is going on? That's a good question. I could either take this first. Times have changed. The world of social media, if you follow on IG, these wives are posting everything. So they're going out. I see it.
No, they need to kick them out of the house.
Yeah.
Tell them to go back to Florida or go back to wherever they live in the off season. I don't know, man. It's tough to say. I went to a few games early on. I don't usually get there early enough to know if batting practice is happening. I know they're running out of the smoke again, like they did the last couple of years. So I don't know. I know they're probably taking BP on the road. Hopefully they're taking BP at home. The baseball's a funny freaking game, and sometimes
it doesn't make sense.
Right. And that's just the way it is sometimes. Frustrating, just frustrating.
I'll put it this way, because I agree with you. It's just a frustrating, doesn't make sense kind of thing. The Mets have the worst record in baseball since April. What did I write down here? April 21st.
Right.
10-24.
Yeah.
Right. April 21st, 10-24. The worst. So I don't think it matters where the hell they're playing. That's my answer. So there you go. But we appreciate. That's a great question, Jake. Thank you. Let's go 2 more questions. Your boy, JK at NYMG.
MGI.
Yeah, can't forget the I. I believe it stands for Islanders because I see the NY, all that. So he goes, oh boy. For both of you, do you think the fans are going to turn on Lindor soon? Do you see a breaking point for fans? I'll go first on this one.
Please do.
They already tried the ovation when he was struggling mightily, a la Trey Turner last year, and it worked. They did that. And while he did play well for a couple weeks after, the dude is still batting 200, OPS 650, above average defense. I think the Mets are not turning on Lindor as much as they're numb.
The Mets or
to
the
this.
Mets fans? Was it the fans?
Met fans, I'm sorry. Yes. The question was for both of you, do you think the fans are going to turn on Lindor soon?
Right.
So my answer, in my opinion, and his second question, do you see a breaking point for fans? I think they're more numb. It's like we have been behind this guy for so long, and even like the biggest of Lindor fans don't really have a leg to stand on right now because he's just not producing. We talked about where we would bat him in the lineup, take a day off, respect the game, in terms of he does play every day. I don't think there's a breaking point, and here's my answer to JK. I just think they're numb because it's almost like in their wildest imaginations, and yeah, he got a 30-30 year last year in a Silver Slugger, but I don't even think they thought that he could be playing this poorly. He will not make another All-Star game. He's not going to win another Gold Glove, and this is his fourth season. When he was in Cleveland, he won all the Gold Gloves. He made all the All-Star teams. It's almost like his prime was before his prime in Cleveland, and then he got $341 million and is playing, not even playing like a good player. The numbers speak for themselves. I'm not wrong. His average is not even good for a guy making league minimum right now. So I don't think it's a breaking point. I think, in my opinion, Met fans and the biggest Lindor fans are just numb to him. I don't know where you are with this. We know he's a good player, but it's
I mean, the ends don't justify the means at this point in time. Obviously, the contract is enormous, and it's just not. It's not there right now, and it hasn't been there for a while. Unfortunately, let's try something different, man. Let's sit him down. Let's move him down in the lineup. I think that, like we've said numerous times, even in this podcast today, the guy wants to win. The guy wants to play well. It's not like he's happy. Although I don't know, sometimes smiling and goofing around with the other team. Like, can we nip that in the bud? Can we nip that? There's nothing to smile about out here.
Mr. Smiles, his nickname.
Frustrating. I think that some fans are going to snap. I think so. I think that there's also that group of Mets fans that try to support their guys no matter what. And then there's everything in between there. I do believe numb is a good way to describe it for a lot of fans. Just couldn't foresee that this could continue.
To put a bow on the question, and thank you, JK, the reason I use numb is because I was always a big supporter of Lindor, but I'm numb to it. It's like I can't get angry anymore because it's expected. He has not shown me that he can come up in the clutch. Whenever the Mets need a big hit and he's up in that situation, he has failed time and time again. And the players that are making that kind of money and are supposed to be the leaders, and you're making $34 million a year and you're paid accordingly, they're coming through. They are. I'm looking at the numbers. The big superstars, they're hitting with runners in scoring position, So I'm numb to it.
You and I have talked about and we'll put an end right here. You and I have talked about this off air. The at-bats look the same. And that's my concern, is they look the same. It's high fastball, breaking ball down and in. High fastball, breaking ball down and in. So that's where obviously adjustments are not being made, unfortunately.
Yeah, totally agree. Right-handed better, left-handed weak, but he's never going to change until he does.
Start hitting right-handed.
Yeah. We got one more question, and then we're going to go into quick pitches.
All right.
New one here, Steve Levine, S. Levine 17. This one's for you, Bill. Okay.
Okay.
Does the old adage for pitchers, quote, work fast, throw strikes, and change speeds, end quote, still hold true in today's game? If so, why aren't we seeing more pitchers and prospects working from, say, a 70-mile-an-hour knuckleball to a 91 two-seam fastball? I'll leave this one, obviously,
You
for
know what?
you.
That's a great question, and I do still think it holds. And I'm going to use a great example. The other night I was watching Sonny Gray pitch, and I forget his name for the Cubs, but a young Mexican guy who was in the World Baseball Classic 2 years ago and had a really, really good World Baseball Classic. And they were doing exactly what Levine is talking about. 92-mile-an-hour sinkers, cutting the ball, changing speeds. It does still play. Sonny Gray's having a very good year. I wish I could remember this guy's name, but I'm drawing a blank again. I'm terrible at this right now. But it can happen. Unfortunately.
Azad?
Yes.
Javier Azad?
Yes.
Or something like that? Yeah.
Assad, I think it is.
Assad.
ASSAD.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And they pitched a great game. And none of their pitches were over 92, 93 miles an hour. It doesn't hold water anymore because, guys, it does. It can, is what I mean. It can. It doesn't as much as it could because you don't get recruited. You don't get scouted. You don't, unless you're blowing up the radar gun.
Bingo.
And unfortunately, the guy, and we'll teach them how to pitch. How can these guys teach them how to pitch when the guys that are in the minor leagues didn't pitch long enough to know how to pitch?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You're hiring guys that are college players, that were college coaches, that didn't have long careers in professional baseball. How are you going to teach a guy how to pitch when all he's done his whole freaking life is try to blow up the radar gun? So I think that baseball might be at a little bit of a crossroads where things are going to have to change a little bit. And I think it could still work at 70-mile-an-hour knuckleball to 92-mile-an-hour sinker. But you have to push pitching. You have to push pitching. Don't push throwing, saying we'll teach you how to pitch. Because I don't believe that these organizations hire older, professional, former major leaguers that went through the battles, that went through the wars, that tried it every single freaking way they possibly could to teach the guys how to pitch.
I think you nailed it. No one's going to get signed with throwing 92-mile-an-hour two-seamers, So there you go. But it works to the for a century. That's how old school baseball was. Nobody was Paul Skeens throwing 103 miles an hour every stinking pitch. That's just not possible and sustainable. So, you're right. And that's a great question by Steve Levine because it worked for a long time, but now we see all these arm injuries. Why? Because they're throwing so freaking hard and they're torquing with whatever. If you get back to what he's talking about and what you're talking about, maybe the injuries stop. Who knows? So
I would
great
think
question.
they would decline. And I think, you know what? I think the fact that the coaching staffs at the lower levels in the minor leagues and that are not former long-term players, former major league players, as much as they were when I was coming through, that heck, man, velocity rules. I don't have to teach them as much. Just velocity rules.
Again, that's the answer. That velocity rules. That chicks dig the long ball. Same exact thing. So that's going to wrap up the mailbag. It's been a while, but we want to thank everybody who wrote in. We had some really good questions there. We appreciate that. So every week, a couple days before we record, Shay_hello. Go please follow on X, Shay_hello, I should say. And we will answer just like we just did. Before you wrap up, my favorite segment of our podcast, Bill, is Quick Pitches, and it's been way too long. Now,
yeah, and you're going to probably have some good ones. You've had enough time to boil up a few good ones.
I hope I do. We'll find out. If anyone doesn't know this, if you're a first-time listener, again, watching, hit that subscribe button, Shaylo Media. Follow us wherever you get your podcast. 3 questions for Bill Pulsifer, non-baseball related. He doesn't know what's coming, and it's rapid fire. Bill, are you ready? Because I am.
Always ready. I can't wait.
All right. Number 1. Would you rather have hands for feet or feet for hands?
Would I rather have? Well, I definitely want to have. Oh, wait a minute. Hands for feet.
Yeah,
I would rather have. No. I would rather have hands for feet. Do I still have my hands?
You have both. No matter what, you're keeping all. But you're gonna have to make a switch here. So hands for feet or feet for hands, and this is your life.
If I have hands for feet, do I still have hands for hands?
No, you're gonna be, and I'm making this up on the spot. But I'm going to say you're going to have to flip
Well,
flop
what
them.
does it matter? Because I have both.
Right, but now your hands are your feet, and your feet are your hands. You're like it's a reverse. So think about it that way. What would you rather have? Hands for feet, so you're walking around with your hands, I
Well, I know,
guess.
but I'm walking around on my hands. But are my hands still my hands, even though I'm
No,
walking
they're
on
now
my?
your feet. You have 10 toes as
Well, shit, it
hands.
doesn't matter then because I don't have a choice. They're flip flopped
Well, I guess you
regardless
could
of what
have
I say.
if you could have feet as oh, yeah, you could I
You
get it.
understand what I'm
So
saying?
what would you pick?
If
Yeah,
I
no,
had
I
to
do.
choose, but my hands are still my hands, I'd rather have hands for feet.
Okay, that's
That
the
way, I can
question.
still use my
Yeah.
hands the right way. I
Right.
would not
Okay.
want to have
That
feet
was the
for.
question.
I wouldn't want to be
Yep.
feet and feet. That wouldn't
Yeah,
work
yeah.
well.
No.
Although I could
Okay.
probably run.
That was a question.
I could walk on all fours and run like an animal.
Yeah, I mean, many animals have this,
But
So,
I would have to
uh,
say, if I keep my hands, I would rather have hands for feet and my hands.
okay,
I can
fair
do a
enough.
lot of grabbing at that point in time. I can grab all
When,
kinds of stuff off the shelves.
yeah, and I was thinking of like this, imagining what I could do with feet as hands and vice versa. But I
Run
like
like an
that.
animal.
Oh yeah, because
Run like a
yeah,
horse. Maybe.
yeah, and say goodbye to feet problems, because those suck. When you got ailing feet. So,
Yeah.
all right, number 2. Now, this is not the greatest question now that I look at it, so hopefully 3 will, but we're still going to read it. What do you enjoy more, texting or making a phone call? As Bill Pulsifer.
It depends on the time. Obviously, if I really want to get the point done, it will be a phone call. If the point really has to be made, or I'd rather do it that way. Especially because if it's going to be a diatribe, nobody wants to sit down and read a novel while they're doing text.
Yep.
If it comes down to it, obviously, I think a phone call is more personable than a text. I do text. Don't get me wrong. I do text plenty. I have text threads and that. But I would say phone call over text if it came down to it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm the same way. Place and time for everything. And you can make the argument with phones and everything now, it's gone out of hand, and iPads and computers. But I'm the same way, and I feel like most people are. Not happy with that question.
It
Kind of
wasn't
like
terrible. I
it
think
was a
it's very
soft.
relevant in this day and age.
It
There's
is.
some people that will stick to strictly texting and don't make phone calls.
You're right, and like you said, I agree. Phone calls are imperative when they need to be,
Yep.
But time and place for everything. So, number 3, I think this one will be good. I'm not patiently waiting your answer. I want it now. If you could be best friends with an animated character from an animated show, which show would you take, and what animated character?
Well, I would have to say Daffy Duck.
Wow.
Looney
Okay.
Tunes, Daffy Duck. Yeah.
Any
I think he'd be a
reason?
cool. I think that he and I are brothers from another mother's.
From different mothers?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like
I
Daffy
was
Duck.
okay.
He's a little bit quirky. He's a little bit out there. I always had I listen. Bugs Bunny's cool as a fan too, but I got something.
Okay.
I like Bug. I like Daffy.
I was expecting you to say something more recent, like Family Guy or Homer Simpson, or even though that's not recent. But
No, I mean, listen, I enjoy
yeah,
those shows. Don't get me wrong,
right.
but I'm a Looney Tunes guy. My
Okay.
senior year in high school, all of my buddies, we all had heads of Looney Tunes guys, and we cut the heads off of the bodies, and we strung string through them, and we wore them as necklaces. I was Daffy Duck.
I did not expect that answer, and I love it. So, good question, good answer.
Thank
Love
you.
it, and that's why we do. That's why we do quick pitches. So, I'd be remiss, by the way, as we are about to wrap up episode 35. I am wearing a Jacob deGrom old school Friday night giveaway T-shirt when he had the long hair. I'm holding it up for everybody watching on YouTube at Shaylo Media. What do you think, Bill?
I love it. I love it.
No,
and I'd be remiss too. Can I put my T-shirt out?
Please.
This weekend.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Number retirement.
Yeah.
This is from my man
Strawberry
Chris Vitale
and Willits Point, Shea Stadium.
Yeah, man. These were actually a box of these were shipped to Citi Field, and hopefully some of the guys are going to be rocking them.
Oh, they better be rocking that. That's awesome.
Hopefully not on the field though, because apparently they're not licensed right now. But hopefully the guys take them and they wear them. This is Big Fly Big Fly Company, my man Chris Vitale.
It's a great shirt. If you're listening on wherever you listen, I strongly recommend, not for the Jacob DeGrom shirt, but for what Bill just showed to the camera. On YouTube is our channel, at Shaylo Media. This shirt is with Strawberry getting his number retired, has the Willets Point Shea Stadium station and Strawberry on it, and number 18, of course. That's a great shirt. Props to your buddy who made those. Absolutely.
It's a pretty damn cool T-shirt. I had to have one.
Perfect. Yeah. I absolutely love that shirt. Nothing on no.
I love that one too.
This to Jacob DeGrom in this, but
they're both good
that
shirts.
shirt was amazing. So
thank you.
Any last words before we get out of here on episode 35?
Good to be back. Happy to do a show for the first time, and it's been about 5 weeks. Hang in there, guys. There's better days ahead, one way or the other. If it ain't right now, it's going to be at some point.
Yep, absolutely.
What happened? Did you lose me?
Yep, absolutely, man. It's been good having you back, and hopefully we could get this thing rolling every week like we used to do. Times are tough in Metland, but we can't control it. So, with that being said, I want to thank Stephen White, and for Bill Pulsifer, my name is Casey Lynn saying so long from the Shaylo podcast. Until next time.